Observing, being interested in people, hearing from other different perspectives, no matter what field you work in, these skills are valuable. And our guest today absolutely oozes these skills. I'm Ali Hill and welcome to Stand Out Life, a podcast dedicated to exploring what does it take to live boldly in amongst the mess, the busyness and the uncertainty of our world. Bridie Jabour has a deep fascination in people and their stories. It's an interest that drove her towards journalism, which is now been her career for the last 20 years. And she currently has the role of the multimedia transformation editor at The Guardian in London. She's also been a reporter, an editor, a commentator, a podcast host, and is an author, recently completing her third novel. In this conversation with Bridie, we talk a little bit about where her interest in people has come from. We also explore some of the themes that she weaves in her latest novel, which is called Ordinary, Funny, Tragic. These themes include that deep love that we can have as a parent, but also what bubbles up is that sometimes surprising absolute rage. We talk about the complicated nature of grief and dying, and we also explore how do you explain to someone what your mother is like, because often that is complicated, deep, and it's hard to wrap into words. One of the things that we didn't get around to into this conversation was to talk about Bridie's non-fiction book, which is called Trivial Grievances, where she explores the myths and the miseries of being in your 30s. And it's really just another great example of Bridie's observations and her approach to things that can be tough, and also the really diving into how those ordinary moments in our lives actually become the most extraordinary things that we remember. So expand your thinking, be just a little bit more curious, and enjoy this conversation with Bridie Jabour. Hey, real quick, before we dive into today's conversation, if you're a leader or a manager, then I want to tell you about pragmatic thinking. We help people like you doing the hard work of building better cultures, stronger teams, and more confident leaders. How do we do it? Well, we do it using the latest in psychology and behavioural science, combining with nearly 3 decades of experience. So visit pragmaticthinking.com or find the link in the show notes below to find out more. Now, on to today's chat. Bridie, welcome. It is great to be having this conversation with you.
An absolute pleasure to be here, Ali. Thanks for having me.
Now, you're coming all the way from London today, and I am based on the southern part of the Gold Coast. So I actually want to start our conversation because I understand that you were a cadet with the Gold Coast Bulletin. Tell me what that young cadet felt like, what they thought journalism was all about at that stage.
Well, you've done your research, Ali. When you said the southern end of the Gold Coast, I was about to say, oh my God, one of my favourite parts of the world. I lived there in my last couple of years on the Gold Coast, and I still return when I can for family holidays. That's going back a long way. When I moved from Grafton in northern New South Wales to the Gold Coast to start a cadetship at the newspaper. So I finished school in November, December, and I actually started at the Gold Coast Sun in January. So straight out of school into journalism. And I had a scholarship where I was doing my degree at Bond University, but at the same time I was working as a cadet for the Gold Coast Sun and the Gold Coast Bulletin. And I was just absolutely thrilled to be there. I had always been interested in journalism, but I just did not think that I would be able to get into it. And it sounds, I guess, a bit funny to say now, it's almost 20 years later, but even back then, 20 years ago, it was seen as a precarious industry, hard to break into. The internet was happening, didn't know what the future would be like. And I basically applied for every scholarship that I could at various universities. And that was the only journalism one I applied for, and I got it. And I've been in journalism ever since. And to me, I was really interested in politics, but working at the Gold Coast Bulletin, that's not what I started out in. Cadets, you cover everything, a lot of police reporting as a cadet, a lot of accidents and what's going on around the Gold Coast, as well as a lot of local council issues, which I think is of enormous importance, and which I think has been really bad for our democracy over the past 20 years, because one of the parts of journalism to be eroded is council reporting, of course. But anyway, I'm not going to spend an hour talking about reporting on councils. I will say the way that I felt at 18, the way that I felt when I started out in journalism, I thought the Gold Coast Bulletin was the centre of the world. I thought that everyone was waiting with bated breath as we put that newspaper to bed for what was going to be published the next day. And that was part of being 18. That was part of, it was quite a large newspaper at the time, but I think it's something that can only happen when you're young, because, now I'm in the London office of The Guardian, which is, a dream job, beyond a dream job. I didn't even have the imagination to dream of this job, to be honest. But I've never had that feeling again of feeling like I'm at the absolute centre of everything, and that what I'm doing, like everyone is waiting to hear about what we're going to report on. And yeah, and that really, really exciting feeling. I'm still excited to work, but it is not like what it was like at the Gold Coast Bulletin.
That's so wild where you talk and even describe it as potentially a precarious career, and a part of me wonders whether there were people trying to talk you out of it at the time or kind of guide you into other areas. But just that absolute awe and wonder of being in that space and place. I love even almost that anticipation that the words that we're writing and what we're putting out and waiting for the publication, they're waiting for the morning newspaper, that
really
real
matters.
sense of excitement. Yeah.
And it still really matters. It still really matters what's happened in your city that day. It matters what's happened in your country that day. It matters what's happening at a policy level, a national, global level. Of course, all that still matters, but I have not been able to recapture that feeling that everyone is waiting for bated breath for our reporting. And I would say another thing that I absolutely love about it, and that I think the real reason that I got into journalism, is I just love people. I love talking to them. I love hearing their stories, whether that's in court reporting or an average person on the street or a politician. And I think that has been a real key to my career, is that I love people. I've always loved talking to them. I've always loved finding things out. And that is a part that has never left me.
It comes with a real, you've got to have a sense of curiosity and even a level of observation. That sounds like that was a part of the interest of getting into people, understanding people's stories. Do you have any sense of where that came from for you?
Oh, I think that's a really good question, actually. When I moved to London, I didn't move to London last year. I was in London for work last year for 2 stints over 6 weeks. And I'd never really spent any time in this city. And I was walking around this city thinking, I wish I could show my dad that. Oh, Dad would love that. Oh, Dad would think that's so interesting. Oh, look at that building. And I was really enjoying the city. And then I had this realization, and it's quite earnest. I thought, I'm enjoying it for Dad. My dad's back in Grafton, and he would enjoy London. There's parts of London he would hate, actually. But I just had this realization that he had given me this gift of being really curious about the world, really open to the world, and noticing things and enjoying noticing things. And it was okay that Dad wasn't with me, because I was enjoying it for him, and he would love how much I was enjoying it. So I would say a big part of it is how I was raised. And there's my mum as well. My dad really loves noticing things. He always has funny little stories about interactions or people or things that people said, which I have definitely got from him. And my mum is loves people, and it's the combination of those two things that has made me the person I am. She loves talking to people. She loves telling stories. She loves sitting around a table. She's Irish, and it is very Irish, the way that you can sit around a table for hours talking about absolutely nothing. And Dad does not love people as much as my mum. So those two things have combined in me. And, it's the way I was raised. I was the oldest of four. We sat down to dinner every single night, which was completely normal to me. And as I get older, I realise how lucky I was to experience that. And we'd tell each other about our day. And if you're going to tell each other about your day, you have to be noticing some interesting things in your day to tell people at the end of it.
That's, so interesting where some of those threads come from, just the family, not just, but from the family dinner table, those key conversations. And I also have a curiosity, from Grafton to London, I also went to high school in a small country town just out the back of Coffs Harbour, so that kind of mid-north coast.
Oh, you know my area
region.
then.
I know the area, and I know the types of people that those towns gather and how you run into the whole gamut of people within your community, and you get to know their stories and you get to know their families and you see them on a regular basis. And there is something around those kind of, in Australia, regional country towns where the stories, we belong to all of those stories just by virtue of being in the town. And I'm curious how much that then feeds into life and working at The Guardian in a city like London, that almost regional country town, conversations, storytelling, gathering, sharing, where that feeds into the work that you're even doing now.
Well, I could say that I feel like an alien in London sometimes. I've lived in cities, since I was 18. I moved to the Gold Coast, then Brisbane, then Sydney for 13 years, and now London. So I'm not new to a city. But I do feel like an alien in London when I make a joke to a barista and they look at me in horror. And they don't know why I'm being friendly to them or why I'm smiling. I get on the bus here and I say good morning or good afternoon to the bus driver, and sometimes they don't even look at me. And I feel like, I've been joking, that I feel like a real country bumpkin here at times. And I think that definitely comes from that sense of place, that from growing up in a regional town. As for how it informs my work, I think that it's kind of in the abstract, growing up in that country town. And I can tell you that I thought it was the most boring place in the world when I was a teenager.
I couldn't wait to get out.
I wasn't romanticising it at the time. And I don't think I could ever live in a country town again, actually. It's a running joke in my family. But I think what it gave me, I think a lot of my self-confidence comes from that, because I feel really grounded in place. And I grew up feeling like I really belonged, and that people in the street weren't just strangers. They're people that you can talk to, that you can trust the people around you to a degree, that you look out for one another. And I still try to bring some of that to London. And I think that it's informed my work in a way that I think one of the reasons I'm in London is that I am a good communicator and I am good to work with, and I have lots of ideas and I have confidence in expressing those ideas. And I think a lot of that comes from growing up feeling really settled and really grounded in place, and knowing that I belonged somewhere in the world. And there's that old cliche, like, you can never go back home again. Well, I've always known I could always go back home if I ever needed to.
You've done a whole range of different things, from what I understand, in the realm of journalism, including being an opinion editor at The Guardian. And I am really interested in, what was it that drew you to that area of journalism? And even in the 20 years within your career that you've been working in this area, and I know you've also written novels, and we're going to get to your kind of latest novel, and that intersection between journalism and what I'll call more kind of creative writing. But when I think of media, and I will include social media in that, there are a lot of opinions out there, but often not a lot of really great places for thoughtful dialogue and discussion. How, in this kind of area of journalism, that opinion editor kind of work, what has changed for you in that work? Like, what's, when you went into it versus how you might navigate it now? What has changed for you, and what is it that interests you in that area?
Well, in opinion, not a lot has changed in editing opinion. I don't edit opinion at the moment, but I did work in it for 5 years, so quite a long time. And not a lot has changed in the Guardian sense or the newspaper sense, in that what attracted me to it was, yes, you can have opinions, but those opinions need to be informed. You need to be led to those opinions by facts. Opinions, and maybe there's a framing today where opinions are like just what you reckon, just what you think, or just what you feel, which is what you feel is legitimate, but very dangerous to be dominated by that and only led by that. And something that I hold dear and I think is so important, and I think that The Guardian does really well, is publish opinion. Of course, people have opinions and they have like subjective experiences that inform those opinions, but the opinions published in The Guardian, people have done a lot of reading, people have done a lot of thinking, people have done a lot of research. People have done years of study and degrees to then have their opinion published in The Guardian. And also observing, like there has to be a lot of observation. It can't just be, your opinion can't just be formed by a bunch of anecdotes. My friend experienced this on the bus. My friend experienced this in a shop. My mother had this experience, buying or selling a house. Yes, that's important, but you need to have some data there. You need to talk to people who have observed the trends over decades. It needs to be informed, and I think that's really important. And am I concerned? I think concerned is a strong word, but I am off-put by some of the opinions online that is essentially talking to a camera about what you reckon. Like there's grades of opinions. There's a spectrums when it comes to opinions, and I'm always much more interested in the informed side. And I think that opinion writing is really important because news articles are there to give you the facts, obviously, but I think opinion writing gives you the context, and it also is the thing that can change minds. It can win hearts and minds, and if that's informed, if that's backed up by research and deep thought and data, that's a very powerful thing and a force for good. We all know what the force for bad looks like when it comes to expressions of opinions online. I don't need to go into that.
It's such a great way to put it. It's that kind of the moment we go, well, this is what I reckon, holding with curiosity or a pause to be able to kind of go, well, what is out there? What's being said? What other information? And not just what backs what I'm thinking, but what else might be out there to be informed by some of that. Yeah.
What you reckon should be your starting point. And it's so important to be challenged, to read things that you disagree with and be open to changing your mind. One of the great joys of life, of being human, is changing your mind. Imagine thinking exactly the same things at 38 that you thought at 20.
How comfortable life, are you at changing your mind? And I guess where you might have seen kind of dialogue where people get challenged on some of that, because I agree. There's something around that real depth of curiosity. I remember hearing, and it really stuck with me, someone saying, it's like, well, this is what I reckon, but I always hold 10% that I might be wrong. And I just love that sense of, well, there just might be 10% that I might be wrong here, but I'll run with the bit that I know until I am informed otherwise. But it does require us to be okay with getting off a high horse at times, or getting off of actually changing our opinion. Is that been something you've ever wrestled with, or is that something?
Oh my God, I used to be so defensive. I think a lot of people, particularly in your 20s, I used to be so defensive. If someone disagreed with me, I would think of it as an attack. Not that it would make me angry, that it would make me feel really insecure. Like I would be uncomfortable getting into a disagreement with someone, and then I would think that they think that I'm stupid or dumb or that being wrong or my opinion not being a correct one was a poor reflection on my character. And that age-old story of getting older, and I became much, much more comfortable with it. And I realised a few things that I was wrong about. Very cliched, but an easy way to be humbled is to have children. That's a great way to learn about how much you don't know.
You don't.
And every year of parenting is the same as well. More is revealed about your limits are limitless, basically. And if you can get comfortable with that, it opens up a whole new world. But I think also working at The Guardian was really good for me in being able to disagree with people and not seeing it as a personal attack, and being able to change my mind, because there's a real intellectual curiosity that runs through my workplace. There's also people I encountered. I am still friends with her, but I was very good friends with a French girl when I was in my late 20s. She was living in Sydney. And it was so interesting she was so different to anyone I'd ever met. It was so interesting to observe her when someone said something that she said something and someone disagreed with her. And she would just look thoughtful and go, that's interesting, and really get into it. And I could tell she wasn't taking any of it personally. And she just thought of it as, a great path to go down and to tease out these ideas and then maybe come to a better opinion. And so that's when I started to realise maybe I didn't have to be right all the time, and horror of horrors, maybe I wasn't right all the time. So it's still difficult for me sometimes now, but there's a few big things that I've changed my mind on over the past few years. And I think as you change your mind, you realise how liberating it is, and it becomes almost semi-addictive, and you want to change your mind again. You know, what else out there don't I know?
That's right. That's right. What can I let go of, jettison off for a little while and have that freedom? I love that lived example too of someone going, oh, well, that's interesting, and maybe there's another take. And the more we can have examples of those types of conversations, I think it can only be useful. No, I understand. Even as a young kid, you've always really enjoyed writing. Obviously, you're doing that as a journalist, but also as a novelist. Talk to me about writing. Where does your journalism inform your writing for novels, and where is it quite different?
So I think my love of humans, of people that I was talking about earlier, is really informs both, and very key to my journalism and my work, and very key to novels. I think if you are going to write, well, I guess you could write novels and not like people. You can write novels for a place of disdain, but that's not the place I come from. And if you're going to make up people and spend all this time with these made-up people, I think that you do have to enjoy humans to a degree. You have to be on the lookout each day for little interactions that interest you. I would say also that the way that journalism has informed my novel writing, I can tell this is my third book, and I could tell each time that the publisher was quite shocked every time that I turn in something on deadline. You know, I think in publishing, maybe like there's deadlines can be sort of a looser concept than what it is in journalism. But in journalism, you only have a day, you know, usually, or maybe 3 days, maybe a week. But you have to be able to turn around 1,000 words within a day. Like that is a really basic part of being a reporter and a journalist. And when you'll give it, and you know, the paper back in the day, the paper had to come out. You know, the website has put even more time pressures on because you have to get stories up as other news outlets are getting stories up. So I'm really, really good at meeting a deadline, and I'm really, really good at getting words on the page. And I think that comes from my journalism. Like, I don't agonize over each sentence in the first draft. I agonize over them later, of course, but I'm really good at just getting words on the page, writing on the page, and knowing that once I've done that, I can work with it. And so I think that journalism takes away a sort of like paralysis at the desk that some writers experience.
Publishers would love that, Bridie, I'm sure.
Yeah.
So your latest book, I have it here. I have read it. Ordinary, funny, tragic. Before we get into the story, I'm curious about your process in writing a novel. Where do you start? Do you start with the end in mind? Do you start with a character? Do you start with a setting? Like, talk to me a little bit about where the genesis of an idea of a novel comes from for you.
Well, so much writing happens when you're not writing. So I think the genesis of the idea starts before I even realise I'm starting a book. And this one started with things that I was thinking about. My first novel, I had quite a clear idea of the story in mind. You know, I wanted to do in the week leading up to a wedding, basically, and the story of a family and, you know, everything falling apart. With this book, it started with actually thinking about maternal ambivalence, of all things. And I watched, it still stayed with me for years now, because this novel took years. For all my talk of meeting deadlines and being able to write quickly, this novel did take years. And I watched The Lost Daughter on Netflix a few years ago. I think I watched it in lockdown, so around 2021. And I reread The Pursuit of Love by Nancy Mitford at the same time. And in both of these books, there's a ambivalent mother and a mother not behaving the way that she should. And I was thinking about that and thinking, you know, that's an interesting concept. We talk about so many things in our culture that we didn't used to talk about, but we don't really talk about maternal ambivalence, or someone who's a mother who's actually not that interested in being a mother. And then I thought, it'd be interesting to do the perspective of like a grown-up child. You've had that ambivalent mother through your childhood, and what are you like as an adult? But I also thought that sounded very heavy, and I'm not interested. There's a lot of heaviness in journalism, particularly at the moment, and there's a lot of heavy, tragic stories, and I wasn't interested in writing anything traumatic or emotionally difficult. And so I was thinking about those things, but I put it to the side. And then I read these books by these English writers all in a row from like the 40s onwards. And The Chamomile Lawn by Mary Wesley was one of them. Fantastic book. Female Friends by Faye Weldon was another. And I also read a lot of Diana Athill, famous publisher turned writer in her 70s, which I love, became a bestseller in her 70s. Anyway, those are three English women, and they write these books and they write about these really traumatic things like losing children, infertility, abortion, death, war. And there was a complete lightness to all of it. Nancy Mitford does do it as well. And it was written about in quite this English way. It's just a matter of life and a matter of fact, and also in this very funny way. And I got really inspired by that. And I thought maybe I could write something about maternal ambivalence that doesn't have to be super serious. Maybe it could just be funny. And then, though it all came together and I actually wrote the first chapter, it just poured out of me, and that rarely happens. I think I actually started writing it on my phone and then moved to a computer. And what that first chapter of the book is almost exactly word for word what I wrote 4 years ago. And so much of the book has changed. The structure of the book has changed. But that first chapter remains. And then once I had that first chapter, I write quite chronologically. I didn't know what was going to happen in the book. I had a vague idea, I think. I knew that the mother would die. And that's not a spoiler. I think that's on like the blurb of the book. Oh, no, well, it's in the first chapter. I knew the mother would die, and I thought it would be funny to have 2 funerals and have to like take this body to the other side of the world. But I didn't know that there was going to be a crazy aunt, for example. I didn't know about the duck. That actually came to me while I was writing. I feel like I'm teasing here, but I want people to read it. But it did go through some very heavy revisions. So when I wrote the first draft, it alternated in perspectives between Villy, the mother's diary, and her daughter at present day. And so it was going backwards and forwards from the 90s until now. And it just did. And then I realised, I did realise, but also my amazing publisher, Catherine Milne, said, you should just do this in one voice. And she was absolutely right. And so that process, quite a long process, but really creatively satisfying. And I love being in that world and thinking about them.
I imagine that kind of not only the premise but the style that you want to write in, and hearing that, like reading those other books and almost seeing the permission, for want of a better word, to be able to go, how we can play with this quite lightly. On a practical level, how do you do the dance between, because I imagine you were still doing your day job. How do you do the dance between, because you're a mum yourself, your journalism and then writing for this book?
I have no idea. I actually look back on the past 4 years and I just think, how did I do that? I think I did bite off more than I could chew, but I'm glad that I did it. So this is a trick that I learned from my first book, and I think it really works for journalists and deadlines. I look at my calendar for the week ahead, and I have specific times that I sit down and write the book. And in the first draft side, I had Thursdays off with my younger son, and I would get up, and my older son was going to school. So my husband would do the drop-offs and I would get up early and write for only like 2 hours, not too long, an hour or 2 hours. And then I would have, the rest of the day with my younger child, and I would do that every Thursday. And then I would try on a Saturday or Sunday to block out 2 hours in the morning of a Saturday or Sunday. And that's how I did it, like brick by brick. Thursday, like ideally 2 days a week in the morning, a couple of hours. And that goes up and down. Sometimes you don't write for a month. And I also took long service leave from The Guardian. And, a lot of people want to go travelling on long service leave. But I had 2 young kids, and I knew I don't have any particular desire to go on a month-long European vacation with a toddler and a baby. Like, I do not need to go parent in another location. And financially, I knew that it wasn't going to happen for a long time either, but I still wanted to take that time. So I had the greatest 6 weeks, some of the greatest 6 weeks of my life. And I'm such an advocate now for holidaying at home. I took 6 weeks off in September, October in Sydney, beautiful time in Sydney. And I was still, with the kids and doing drop-off and pick-up and hanging out with them. But I also had 6 weeks off to do whatever. And so I went swimming a lot, I went to the beach a lot, and I did a lot of writing. I think in that 6 weeks, I did maybe 25,000 words. And it was a complete joy because it was, by that point, my youngest son was in childcare a few days a week. And so I had 3 days a week where, they were both in school and childcare. I'd do drop-off and then I would write for hours and then I'd go for a swim and then, I'd pick them up and be in a good mood. It was such a I had so much time for all my friends and family and creative pursuits. It was a great way to do it. And that really, really cracked the back of the manuscript doing that. I don't think that I would have the book today if I didn't take that chunk of time off work to work on it.
I love that, the combination of it feeling like a bit of a vacation at home, to be able to have that space to be able to catch up with friends and go for a swim. Yeah,
I was so relaxed. It did not feel like work at all, because I didn't have a looming deadline either, so I really did get to work at my own pace then.
Yeah. Only because it's front of mind for me. I recently heard a podcast interview with Lamott, and they were asking her about when she sits down to write, because it sounds great to have that time, but I'm brilliant at procrastinating. That's when I see the dirt on the skirting boards, all sorts of things. And she was saying what helps her to stay in the chair is bribes and treats, like saying, I'll just do an hour, I'll get a treat afterwards. Was there any kind of techniques or tools that kind of helped you, or was it the space and purely the joy of being able to sit down that helped?
Anne Lamott changed my life. She is the reason that I've written 3 books. So I read Bird by Bird in my late 20s, finished the book, got up, went downstairs, opened my laptop and started my first book.
Amazing.
I think that her advice is amazing. A key part of her advice that has always stuck with me is write the first draft like nobody's going to read it, because you get so in your head, oh, what will my friend think of that? What will my husband think of that line? Oh, would my mum be upset by that or think that's about her? None of it's about any of them. And she took away so much self-consciousness for me and is the reason I'm able to get my first draft out. But I would physically take myself out of the house and go to the library, because it's never-ending chores. Like my house is never as clean or tidy as I would like it. And if it is clean and tidy, it's certainly not that way when I get home. Again, I can leave it in one state and when I get home, it's in another. And so I would go to Rockdale Library. Actually, I even mentioned it in the acknowledgements because I spent so much time there. And, once you're there, like I'd take treats with me, which is funny. I haven't heard the treat thing from Anne, but I would take, snacks, food, coffee, water. And I'm at the library and I know once I leave the library, I'm going to stop working. So,
yep.
I better get it done and put in my time there. And I found it so useful to change locations. The library was only a 15-minute walk from my house. But, yeah, I found that so useful.
Yeah, great to kind of have that space. And I love Bird by Bird and that time, just the permission just to sit and write, just to get it out, to really do it.
And for it to be bad, permission for it to be bad. Mm. It's fine if it's bad the first time.
Yeah, and you can work on that, as you say. You can craft, you can restructure, you can move it around, you can work with something. But when there's nothing on the page, that's where it feels really, really hard. There's a couple of themes in this new novel that you mentioned, obviously having that idea of maternal kind of figure as a mum, but kind of not really into it. It's not a conversation that we have a lot, but also as an adult daughter kind of navigating that. You also talk about, there's a couple of pages here that I have actually earmarked and put some things in, and probably more around the themes. One of the lines here is, every day of parenting is discovering 100 different ways to fail. We kind of touched on that before, but almost that theme of even having in this book, it's having a 3-year-old, and it's incredible and touching, and they're so funny, and they say things, and it's hard, and it's frustrating, and it's relentless, and it's tiring. Where were bits of, I guess, your own, not direct experience, but I guess exploring some of these themes come into this latest novel?
That line, it's so funny that you picked out that line, because that is also a line picked out by one of the first reviewers who said that he really enjoyed the book and he's a dad himself, and he also picked out that line. So it's obviously striking a chord with people. You know, the thing that I heard Taffy, oh my gosh, how do I say her last name? Brodessa Akner or Akner Brodessa? I can never remember. She's a American writer, writes for the New York Times, and she's written a couple of novels, and I heard her say about novels, all of it's true and none of it happened, when people are asking what it's based on. And I think that's so true. Like, you know, the characters are made up, the situations are certainly made up. Like, you know, the book is particularly this novel is really a work of my imagination, but all of it's true, isn't it? Like it has to come from somewhere. And I actually made the child in at 3 years old because my youngest was 3 years old at the time. I think my oldest was actually 4 when I started the book, and then my youngest was 4 by the time I finished it. So I was really in those years, and I just completely and utterly mined the emotion of it. Like the emotion of it is because I was in it at the time, and it must be why that line in particular is striking a chord, because I would have sat down at the laptop that day and what I was feeling at the time came out on the page.
And it's true. So I have an 18 and a 16-year-old, and it feels true even then. Even, you know, so there's a relentless nature of such young kids. And then, there are times where they, you know, having, as we said before, having children teaches us about ourselves and the things that we have to change, the things that we know that we have to change. That
oh my God, and also nothing like
change.
And the things you discover about yourself, it's usually framed in positive terms, right? Like, you know, I didn't know I could be that patient, or, you know, you discover things about yourself when you become a parent, just like you discover things about yourself in any life-changing situation or scenario, or when you're pushed to your limits. And some of the things you discover about yourself aren't great. Like I would have thought of myself as someone who never gets angry, like really not an angry person, and very even-tempered before I had children. And the rage I have felt at times, and that is in the book too. Not that I act on it, obviously, or act on it in terrible ways, but it's there. And to feel that rage and to discover you're capable of that rage, and not just capable of that rage provoked by a child who you're meant to be looking after and guiding through the world, and who is just behaving like a child. Like that's was very confronting for me to realise.
Yeah, and that half an hour later when they're sound asleep that you could not adore them more. I know. And you're almost surprised at yourself at who was I? Where did that come from?
My friends actually said to me when I was having my first baby, she said one of the best bits of advice she ever got was be careful not to love them the most when they're asleep, which is so true, because they're so easy to love when they're asleep, but that can't, and you love them heaps at that time and, you know, revel in it as well, and definitely revel in them being asleep, but it can't be the time that you love them the most.
Yeah, yes, yeah. That's a good reminder. But as you say, the things that we don't know about ourselves, it is revealing. Not only that rage, I certainly found out that I'm a netball mum, so I'm on the sideline yelling, which I would not. I am quiet,
my God.
passive, but it just came out. I'm like, who is this person?
I'm actually really interested in, it's not so much in this book, but I'm interested in maternal rage and where it comes out. So mine ended up coming out when I'm driving. Yeah. And like all the rage you feel at the world, and like all of your frustration and everything that you keep on top of and project this calm demeanor, like has to have an outlet. And mine turned into road rage. And there was one time when my oldest son was about 3, and someone in front of me braked really hard, and then I braked really hard, and I gasped. So I went, and my son goes, "Mum, was that a fucking hell?" Because he was so used to me swearing when I was driving usually, and when something like that happened. That's the other killer, isn't it? They notice everything. Yeah. They watch everything.
They do not skip a beat. They do not. And they're right when they call it out. Yes, it was.
Yeah. I didn't say it that time, but yes, that is what a fucking hell is, when someone in front of you brakes really hard.
And they're idiots and they shouldn't do it. It all comes out. So, obviously this book navigates, it's family, it navigates parenting, motherhood, having a mum and then being a mum, and the fears of the things that we might judge about our own parents, whether it's small things or not, that fear of maybe that's part of, in us as well, that's woven a little bit through this narrative and this story. The other theme, and you said before, the mother passes away, she dies in this in the story without giving it away. It's in the very first chapter, but it very much deals with complicated grief and the complexity of grief. It's not always just sadness at the loss of love, or even just that kind of moving through the dying phase. There's one of the other lines I picked out here is, even when you're dying, you're still human. You're not exempt from flaws or pettiness. At least that's what I was learning as I drained my cup of tea and stood up. It's that reminder that it's not this, people aren't peaceful and graceful in dying. Again, that, what is it about grief that you explored, or even death itself, that was of interest for you in weaving into this book?
It's a good question, and it's one I've actually thought of myself, like why have I written this book that is about grief in a way, when it's certainly touched my life and lost people that I loved, but I haven't lost a parent, I haven't lost a sibling, and I haven't lost a best friend, and I know that those, and I'm actually not even going to say what the worst death could be. I can't even say it out loud. Parental grief would just be, I can't even really comprehend it. But I'm still really interested in it. I think it comes back to loving people and being interested in people. And I think growing up with death being a part of life, like my siblings and I are actually very obsessed with our mortality and always have been. And we always talk about, like, how are we going to die, who's going to die in which order, what we would do, what our plans are. Like, we have between us 25 plans for what happens when our parents go, like, who goes first and which one. And we're quite comfortable talking about it, but I'm sure that one of the reasons we're quite comfortable talking about it is because it's all very abstract. But I've lost people that I loved a lot, an aunt in particular, and also some cousins, unfortunately, and then also just people through my life. Growing up in a country town, there are teenagers that die too soon. That's not an unusual story. So I've always been interested in grief and in death as a part of life and a natural part of life. And when I was growing up, death wasn't hidden away, and it's certainly not something to be scared of. And my mother has actually a really interesting relationship with death, in that she gets up most days and chats away to her mum, chats away to her dad sometimes. She more chats to her mum, chats away to her brothers, chats to her nieces. And she's Irish. I think you can probably tell that's not an Australian mother.
Yeah.
And Irish Catholic, but she's still very close to them, and they are still people to her. And that's how I grew up with, the dead not being gone forever, and the dead certainly never been spoken about again. That they were talked about all the time as if they were still here, and we still reference them all the time. So I think that my interest in grief came from death, accepting death as part of life in the abstract, but knowing that the actual experience of it is not as straightforward as that. And I don't think that it's something that you can just be at peace with and accept. And I think that grief is a good thing to write about when you're writing about life in general, and how we can say over and over again, I accept life on life's terms, or, life doesn't always go the way that I want it to go. And you can say all that, but living the reality of that is so much more difficult. And so I think grief was a good way to explore that theme through as well. But yeah. I did say to one of my cousins who lost his mum when he was young, I did say, this isn't a book for you. I think it does treat the subject a bit too lightly. It's not a book for anyone freshly grieving.
Yeah, and it's, I think where you talk about, even with your siblings, that, we have conversations around death, and even though they're in the abstract, it's not, sometimes it can be a way to, again, this is the wrong word, but practice, like to be not scared of
Yeah,
the language
and to think
of
about your
death and
feelings
dying.
for each other as well.
Yes.
And to think, and it does help you reflect on what's important in life, even though, like, you'll think about death and how it would feel to have some of the people closest to you dying, and then 10 minutes later be swearing at the bus stop because the bus is 3 minutes late. You know, those states of what's important in life certainly don't last long. Well, for me anyway.
No, I think no, not at all, not at all. And so again, they're useful just sometimes to have front of mind. And you're right. I do think any conversation around death is ultimately a conversation about life, about what matters and what's important. And you can also get frustrated at the bus stop. Like, they absolutely can coexist. One of the other themes and the other passage that I kind of pulled out is around, I guess, almost that, frustration of family, but sometimes even, and not only in grief and death, but in the labels that we might have and how we might talk about those that have passed away. And this bit was before the second funeral that happens overseas, but asked by the local father, like, tell me about your mother. And the line you've got here is, tell me about your mother. Like, it's the most casual thing you could possibly ask someone. Tell me about the person you loved the most in the world, who disappointed you the most in the world, who loved you more than anyone, who could never have lived up to your expectations, who was the most bizarre person you've ever encountered, who taught you how to use a toilet, who screamed at you occasionally for the most banal things like leaving your socks in the doorway, whose attention you never stopped trying to get to notice. And I think that complexity of trying to sum up a life or sum up a label or people, I think that's also something through the characters, through what happens to them, even through the complexity of this dark, and I'll talk to you about this dark in a minute, but it's that we're all flawed and amazing and messy and human, and it's hard to describe that. Where did that kind of dance of some of the, I guess, that sense of trying to embody or not tie a ribbon around, something that's just neat but understanding the complexity of people. How did you dance with that in writing this book?
It's funny you've picked out that passage, because I remember how happy I was with that line and those lines when I wrote them, that I felt that I had really nailed something. A lot of writers would experience this, what you're feeling in your head and the vision of something in your head and then what ends up on the page. Sometimes there can be oceans between that. And that was definitely a line where I felt like I really nailed what I was trying to say. And I can say about that part, a lot of the observations in this book do come from, like, watching other people, from reading many, many books, from watching movies. Like, all of it is inspiration. But that particular paragraph is really me pleading with my children. And I think that I was thinking of my kids at that point and thinking, it's me pleading with them. I know I'm not perfect. But I do love you. And I don't. And you wonder what your kids are going to say about you when they're older. I think that was actually on my mind a lot through this book. And I obviously took it to the extreme, which you do in writing, particularly in fiction. But I think that was what I was thinking about a lot through the book is, what are my children going to say and think about me when I'm older? But I also think that everybody thinks that their mother is the most bizarre human being they've ever encountered. That's another thing that I've realised as I get older. No one, or, well, actually maybe 2 people I know in the entire world, and I have met thousands of people at this point. 2 people would say my mother is a normal person. One of those people is my husband. But
yeah, right.
And it was shocking to me to get used to it. But everyone feels that way about their mother, that they're just baffled by them at times. And why aren't you living up to this idea in my head of a perfect mother? And Naomi Klein actually has a great quote about this, where I'm going to butcher it, but I'll just paraphrase it, where she's like, we have in our minds the evil mother and the great mother, and when our mother is the evil mother, we want to kill them, and when they act like the perfect mother, we want to keep them on that pedestal forever. And it's really, really hard for us to reckon with the truth, which is always in between those things. And it's part of growing up. It can take a lifetime of work, I think. And that was something that I was reckoning with in the book. What happens when you think of your mother as just her own human being and not your mother? I think it's almost impossible to separate the two at times. But I was trying.
Yeah, we didn't know them before that. They've always been that. They've played a role.
I don't think we can conceive really, or many of us can conceive of them before they were our mother. Like, it just does not compute.
No, it doesn't. And even that, yeah, you're right. Like how often we go, my mum was so weird and insane, and
yeah,
and the other thing you kind of allude to in this book is that we hold that as well as believing everyone else's mums are normal. They
exactly
got their good school lunches and they turned up to all the things on time, and we don't often see the rage of these other mums. We don't see the flaws, but that, you know, is a reminder for ourselves, but also our own relationship with our parents or our aunties, our grandparents. It's a really good kind of callback for sure. What with this book, actually, let me go back a step. Let me talk about the duck without giving away what happens to the duck. And what is it that element of this book allowed you to do in your writing? What was it that introducing, you said before, I knew it was in there, but I didn't know where it would weave in. What element did it allow you to explore?
Oh, no, I didn't know the duck was going to be in there when I sat down to write. So the duck was one of the great joys of writing, and we've touched on it briefly about process, and my process is getting to the desk. So I put aside the hours and I sit down and I have to write. And I didn't say that I don't necessarily know what I'm going to write each day when I sit at their desk. I block it out in the calendar and say that I'll sit down at this time. And, you know, and I assume I'm going to write the next chapter. I do write the book mostly in chronological order, but sometimes you just get gifts from above and things just come to you. Like that is being creative. Saying you've got writer's block, I think that people can be creatively stuck, but I also think that if you sit down and you say, I'm not leaving this chair until I've written 1,000 words, whatever comes out, then, you know, that gives a chance for real creativity. And the duck just came out of nowhere, to be honest. Arrived out of nowhere. I sat down at the desk and I didn't know what I was going to write that day. And I think that I must have been in a very fun mood, because I had a lot of fun with that duck, and I liked the thought of something ridiculous, and I loved it. Gave another element of like a comic novel to this novel. Like how do you make a book about grief and mothers dying and maternal ambivalence? How do you make it funny? Well, just have elements of pure comic relief, and I had so much fun with that duck, and I loved how surprising it was as well, because I think that this book could have been in some ways a book that many people have read before. Like, it's not particularly original to write about someone dying. There are a million books out there about eccentric families, and I love them all, and I will try to read every single one of them during my life. And the duck brought this element of surprise and fun, and something that you weren't going to get in almost any other book. And I think even though it was very funny, it does help elevate the book in a way beyond like what could have been writing to numbers or writing along a traditional pattern.
Yeah, there's a playful element, absolutely, that allows to be introduced through that character.
It brings in the ridiculousness of life. Sometimes life is ridiculous. Like,
yeah. And you've talked a bit about the process and writing the book itself, and editing is really just a part of the process. Talk to me about and this is your third novel now, what's it like finishing the editing process, knowing then obviously there's a bit of time before it's published and you receive the book in your hands, but then getting into essentially what we're in a conversation around, which is the marketing process, the talking about the story, sharing it with others, exploring that. Talk to me a little bit about what elements of that you like, how you find that process stepping away from once the book is done. And this book in particular, what is it that it's kind of left with you, and then kind of stepping into that next phase for this book's journey, I guess?
Well, it took 4 years, and my life has changed so massively in 4 years, and this book has been one of my constant companions, and it's almost been a way for me to like process life as it's happening, you know, parenting and funny families and how banal life can be at times, and also where the joy is. So the book was my constant companion in that. But to be honest, it just hasn't felt real this year because out of nowhere I got this amazing work opportunity. You know, I'm in my late 30s. I've got 2 kids. I've lived in Sydney for 13 years. I was very settled there. I had no desire to move countries. I actually wanted to stop moving house. I just wanted to live, you know, live in the same apartment or house for many years. And almost out of nowhere, this opportunity came to move to London for 2 years for work. And then at the same time, I think it was my 3rd revision of my manuscript that I submitted, and my publisher loved it and said, I want to publish this in September. And it was almost at the same time that I got an offer. It was about November to move to London, and my publisher said, I want to publish this next year. So this year, it doesn't feel real. Honestly, sometimes I still think maybe I'm going to wake up and this is going to have been a dream, to move to the other side of the world with my family for work and to have my novel published at the same time. It feels like a huge culmination, like all these years of chipping away and hard work and showing up each day and every cliche, doing my best and trying to really be in the day, although I'm less good at that at the moment, has culminated in these incredible work opportunities. Like parenting is a bit easier. Both the boys are in school and they're like my little buddies at the moment. Like, you know, it's still a new challenge, a new way to fail every year, of course. But it feels like a real year of culmination. And so when I submitted the final edits, it didn't feel real. I still thought, they're going to come back with more. I'm going to have to redo something. But also, because it's been such an intense year, I submitted those edits, and then the next day I'm back in the office for 50 hours at my day job and juggling my kids, adjusting to a new school. So there hasn't actually been a lot of headspace for the book this year, and it feels very surreal to be the marketing part. But I enjoy the marketing part. Like, I enjoy the interviews. I enjoy talking about it and meeting different people. It's not a chore to me, this. Like, it's quite exciting.
It's a huge year of change, Bridie, in terms of, I can only imagine that sense of, change and opportunity and kind of what's in front of you and that culmination of things coming together. Occasionally, and this may not be have popped up for you, occasionally what can happen as human beings is that we start to then jump ahead and go, but what if it doesn't work, or what if it's not good enough, and that kind of doubt and anticipation can weave in. What helps you to navigate when maybe doubt in amongst change or uncertainty turns up for you?
Oh, I've got a great cure for this. It's not a cure. Now that we're closer to publication, I am thinking about, is this actually good? I've been so in it for so long. I'm way too close to it. I can't tell if it's good anymore. And so I am waiting for people to read it and what the response will be like. And particularly people who aren't my friends and family, hearing people who have no investment in me whatsoever. I do like to hear what they think, but you obviously can't be ruled by their reviews. But my cure has actually been reading Virginia Woolf's diaries. So I had them, downloaded them on my Kindle. I forget why. And they're very easy to dip in and out of. So while I've been on long flights and, you don't want to get into a new book, or you just want to be able to read something that you can pick up and put down, I started reading her diaries. And a lot of the diaries are about pre-publication nerves. And it's just before Mrs. Dalloway is coming out, she's writing, this book is terrible. I haven't heard from anyone about it. People are probably embarrassed to talk to me about it. She says it much better than I just did. Obviously, I'm butchering Virginia Woolf as I paraphrase her. But I thought, wow, this is such a universal and normal feeling. And, I've published 2 books before. You think I'd be used to pre-publication, but pre-publication does make you feel a bit crazy. The anticipation and the terror is real. But to read Virginia in the late 30s writing essentially the same feelings, I find very comforting, and it takes me out of myself, and it makes you it's what I love about reading in general, and reading novels in particular. It just makes you realize you're not alone in the world, and you're not the first person to have ever felt this. And it's a very specific part of being human, but it is part of being human, freaking out before the publication of your book.
It's that human kind of thread of connection, right? It's like, oh God, someone else felt like this. Yeah. Someone who I admire.
100 years ago.
thought had it all together. It's the same kind of humanness around it. If I go back to right at the start, you talked about, certainly your interest in getting into journalism was people. That people are so fascinating and their stories are really, really interesting. If we shift from kind of where you've been, certainly with this book in the last 4 years, and start to think about the next 6 to 12 months, what are those stories that are pulling you forward? What are the things that are exciting you about what's next? Whether it is kind of, again, exploring London, more exploring this job. What is it about the stories that are coming up that are exciting you?
Oh, well, it's going to sound very unexciting, but I'm really looking forward to feeling settled. Like, I would really like to slow down the pace of my life. It has been a crazy year. Like, I've moved countries, I've started a new job, settling my children into new schools on the other side of the world, and publishing a novel. I am looking forward to feeling more settled. And I actually had a moment on the weekend where I was on the bus with my husband coming back from dinner, looking out the window, and I was like, our stop's in a few stops, so we're just around the corner. And I thought, it's becoming familiar. It's becoming familiar. I'm not completely lost all the time, both physically and emotionally.
Yeah.
And
it's important to notice that, right?
Yeah. And
have that.
It's like a radio tuning in almost, being like, it's happened bit by bit, and now it's actually like writing a book. You do it bit by bit, and then all of a sudden you arrive. So it's good. Change is good, and it's good to feel uncomfortable, but I've felt plenty of discomfort this year, and I'm really looking forward to feeling settled. And I actually already have the germs of another book, which I thought that I wouldn't write another book until my mid-40s, another 8 years maybe. And I thought my next book will be a big family saga. But actually, another idea has come to me, and that feels very fun. And I think that maybe I will start slowly working on something else as well.
I was curious as to whether there'd be a seed of something else, and I love that. Follow the story, but follow the fun as well is something I've kind of taken out of this conversation. We can have those bigger, touch on big themes, but they don't always have to be
heavy,
as deep and as hard and heavy. Yeah,
it can be part of life, and it can be funny, and it can be terrible as well at the same time. But it's not going to feel terrible forever.
Yeah, so true. Bridie, I've loved this conversation. I so appreciate your time, and I'm excited for what's next for you. Before, just my final question to you, the name of this podcast is called Standout Life. When you hear that term, what does it mean to you to live a standout life?
Well, I think what's important in life is the people who do see you at your worst, which a lot of the time is your children, but of course is your family. But it's, these people who love me they're proud of me that I have a book coming out, but they don't love me because I have a book coming out. And they don't love me because of this job at The Guardian. They don't love me because of all of these things that I've achieved on paper. And I think that is what the standout life is. It's I'm not going to be able to take any of these things with me, or these material or professional successes with me. But when I go, we're getting quite deep now, getting to mortality, but when I go, what will live on is the people that I love and who loved me during my life. And that's what will remain at the end.
Sign up for that. Thank you, Bridie. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much for having me. What a great conversation.
Once again, thank you so much for tuning in. If you liked what you heard in today's episode, please don't forget to subscribe, and also share this with someone who might also get value out of this episode. It's what helps us to continue to bring these incredible conversations. And if you want to be a better leader at work or in your business, then I want to tell you about pragmatic thinking. We help people just like you build stronger teams, healthier cultures, and true leadership confidence. We do it with a background in psychology and behavioural science, combined with nearly 3 decades of proven experience. Thousands of incredible organisations trust us to level up their leaders, and potentially you will too. So please visit pragmaticthinking.com or check out the show notes below. Until next time, have a fantastic week.